to speak today about the phrase, every child a wanted child. It is a catchphrase often used by people in the pro-choice movement, those who favor a woman to have a choice for abortion. And it means if the mother doesn't want the child, then she should have the right to abort. And I want to come back to that later, but it is true that many children are born of parents who really aren't fit to be parents. And believe me, I've worked with literally hundreds of kids who were abuse neglect cases, kids who were taken away from their parents by the courts through children's services. And all of these kids abused in some way, shape, or form. Some of them sexually abused, physically abused, all of them emotionally wounded. And if you read the case studies of some of these kids, it's really heartbreaking in some instances, and you really can't imagine how someone could do some of the things that you read was done to them. But in any case, in working with these kids, in talking to them one-on-one or even in groups, I never would say, when looking them in the eye, I never had the thought cross my mind that it would have been better if this child would have been aborted. I mean, despite whatever they've gone through, whatever trauma, whatever pain and hurt they've been through, whatever difficult circumstances they've been through, I've never would have that thought cross my mind would be better if they'd have been aborted. And I would hope that anyone who would meet these kids and talk to them would not think the same thing either. Many of these kids have really gifted talents in music, sports. Many of them write poetry, working with animals. A number of them would train service dogs for people. I even know one boy now who works as an assistant to a veterinarian. But in any case, some of them go on to lead successful lives. It is also true that a number of these kids end up in the prison population. And what I want to say about that is, even if they end up in prison, that doesn't mean their life isn't redeemable and their life doesn't have value. And sometimes maybe prison could be the best thing, even though bad things can happen in prison. There could be a lot of good things that happen in prison. I know someone who spent a number of years in prison. He now works with youth in Long Island. His name is Reggie Benjamin. I don't think he would mind me mentioning his name. But Reggie tells me, if he hadn't gone to prison, he probably would have been killed on the streets. He was involved in gangs, was even a leader of a gang. His brother was in a gang. But it was while in prison that he began to read and really found faith in Christ that really changed his life. And I want to say there are many, many people, priests, ministers, sisters, lay people who are prison ministers, prison chaplains who visit men and women in prison. So there is really holy work going on in the prisons. And as I say, a person may have a lot of time to read and may have that time to read the Bible. A person can become a saint while in prison. Okay? And in fact, there's a passage in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 25, and it's a famous passage. Many people know it. Jesus speaks of, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. But he also says in there, when I was in prison, you visited me. So Jesus identifies with a person in prison. Getting back to the idea of every child a wanted child, I would say if any mother's out there who's pregnant and contemplating abortion, a woman who's expecting and thinking about having an abortion, I would say, just because you don't want your child doesn't mean there isn't someone out there who wants your child. And actually, couples on the waiting list to adopt, many couples, probably the vast majority of couples on waiting lists to adopt, would prefer a newborn infant, okay, rather than a child who is already of some age. They would like to start with the child, raising it from the beginning. So keep that in mind. Every child a wanted child. Just because you, the mother, may not want the child doesn't mean that someone else may not want your child. Thank you.